Most people hear the phrase stocking up and picture something extreme. A basement full of survival buckets, a frantic cart the night shelves start looking thin. But the households that usually handle price spikes best are doing something far less dramatic. They are quietly buying ordinary food before ordinary food gets expensive. That is the real advantage here. Not panic, timing. And timing matters because grocery inflation rarely hits all at once. It moves in layers. First the harvest problem, then the processing cost, then the shipping contract, then the inventory sitting in a warehouse. Then finally, weeks or months later, the shelf tag changes and everyone acts surprised. That delay is where the opportunity lives. Right now, in several categories, stores are still selling through older inventory made with cheaper wheat, cheaper oils, older crop contracts, and lower input costs. So while most shoppers are walking the aisles as if prices are basically normal, a smaller group is treating this moment for what it is, a brief discount window hidden inside a longer inflation cycle. A neighbor of mine, Sarah, understood that before most people did. She did not become a prepper. She did not clear out a warehouse club. She simply started adding a few high-utility items to her cart whenever the price was still reasonable. One extra jar here, two extra cans there, nothing dramatic. But over a few months, that small habit cut hundreds from her grocery spending and made weeknight meals easier at the same time. That is what this is really about. 11 ordinary foods that can protect a grocery budget far better than their packaging suggests. Why these items matter. Why some are likely to get more expensive. And which versions are actually worth buying. Because if you think shelf-stable foods are all basically the same, a few of these may permanently change how you shop. The first one is one of the quiet workhorses of any pantry, canned tomato products. Most shoppers notice fresh produce prices first because the increase is visible. A tomato that used to cost a little now costs a lot, and you feel it immediately. But canned tomatoes matter for a different reason. They are not just produce, they are infrastructure. One 28-ounce can become pasta sauce, chili, soup, shakshuka, braised beans, curry, pizza sauce, or the base of a stew. That is a lot of meals from something that often costs less than a single impulse snack at checkout. The risk here starts much earlier in the chain. California drives a huge share of U.S. processing tomato production, and when weather hits those harvests, the effect does not show up neatly or all at once. Processors work through contracts. Warehouses empty old stock. Retailers keep shelf prices steady for as long as they can. Then one day, the same can that felt forgettable suddenly costs 30% more. That lag is exactly why canned tomatoes deserve attention now. Some suppliers have already warned retailers about increases in the 30 to 35% range. If a can is $1.89 today and drifts toward $2.50 later, the difference does not sound life-changing. Until you remember how often tomato products show up in low-cost meals. The smart buy is usually the store brand. In many cases, the ingredient list is nearly identical to the premium label beside it. But the premium one is charging you for branding, not better tomatoes. Keep a mix of crushed, diced, and paste if you cook regularly. Stored in a cool, dark place, they hold well for years. And that is the larger point. A cheap starch, some beans, a little leftover meat, and one can of tomatoes can still become dinner. Very few products in the store can make that claim. But the next category may be even easier to ignore because it looks so ordinary. Peanut butter has a habit of hiding in plain sight. It is so familiar that people stop seeing it strategically. But in terms of calories, protein, convenience, and shelf life, it remains one of the most efficient purchases in the grocery store. 2 tablespoons give you roughly 190 calories and around 8 grams of protein. That matters more than it sounds. In a tighter grocery month, peanut butter can stretch breakfast, rescue lunch, or turn toast, oats, apples, bananas, or crackers into something that actually keeps you full for a while. The pricing pressure is easy to miss because jars do not look different when costs rise. But behind the scenes, peanut-producing states like Georgia and Alabama have dealt with drought pressure while processing and energy costs keep adding weight. The usual result is not a dramatic shortage. It is the quieter version. The same jar, a smaller promotion, and then a higher price that somehow becomes normal. There is also a small consumer trap here. Many shoppers pay extra for heavily branded peanut butter loaded with added sugar and oils, as if more ingredients automatically means better value. Usually, it just means more marketing. If a natural version is close in price, it is often the smarter buy. Fewer additives, often less brand overhead, and in some cases a cleaner, more flexible pantry staple. A large jar at $8.99 can drift toward $11 or even $13 without causing headlines. But repeated purchases make that kind of increase expensive fast. And because households buy it almost automatically, timing often gets ignored. One simple trick: if you buy natural peanut butter, store the unopened jar upside down for a few days, then flip it back before opening. It helps the oils redistribute and saves you from the usual stirring workout. Small detail, yes, but smarter grocery habits are often built from small details. And once you notice how quietly staples reprice, cooking oils start to look very different. Cooking oils are one of those categories people barely think about until the bottle is almost empty. That is exactly why they become expensive with so little resistance. Most households need them, few track them, which makes them very easy to reprice. Several forces are pushing here at once. Crop and processing disruptions in key regions have limited output, and policy shifts continue diverting more vegetable oil toward industrial uses like biofuel. Less supply for kitchens usually does not create panic. It just creates a shelf where the price keeps climbing while people assume it must still be reasonable because it is only oil. But oil is not only oil. It is the hidden cost inside most home cooking, baking, and many packaged foods. So when oil prices rise, you often pay twice, once for the bottle and again for the products made with it. Choosing the right kind matters. Coconut oil is unusually shelf-stable and can last for years if stored well. Avocado oil has a high smoke point, which makes it useful across more cooking methods and reduces the need to buy multiple specialty oils. That kind of versatility matters when every bottle costs more. If avocado oil moves from $8 to $12, that is a 50% jump on something many households use weekly. And unlike some luxury grocery items, there is no easy substitute if you cook regularly. There is also a bulk buying mistake here. Giant jugs often look cheaper per ounce, but once opened, oxidation starts working against you. Several smaller bottles can protect quality better than one oversized container you keep opening for months. And please do not store them right beside the stove. That spot is convenient, but it is also a warm, bright little spoilage project. This is where inflation starts getting more serious. Once oils and wheat both move higher, many cheap meals stop being quite so cheap. And that brings us to pasta. Pasta still has one of the best cost-to-fullness ratios in the store. That has not changed. What has changed is how fragile that bargain can become once wheat prices stop behaving. Global wheat markets have been under pressure for years. Poor harvests, fertilizer costs, export disruptions, and unstable supply chains all work their way into basic foods eventually. Pasta manufacturers can cushion some of that for a while if they are still using wheat bought under older contracts. But once that inventory clears, the shelf price catches up quickly. That means some boxes on the shelf today are effectively yesterday's cheaper grain wearing today's packaging. And when replacement costs finally land, shoppers suddenly find themselves staring at pasta like it has become a financial decision. Not all pasta earns equal pantry space either. Whole wheat pasta gives you a little more fiber and protein, which can make a simple meal more filling and keep you from snacking an hour later. Dried egg noodles cook faster, which matters if energy costs are high or you just need dinner done without supervising a long boil. And for storage, compact shapes like penne, rotini, or shells are easier to stack and containerize than long noodles. The practical rule is simple. Cardboard is not long-term protection. If you are storing extra, move dry pasta into airtight containers. Pantry pests are deeply unimpressed by your decision to buy only the good brand. And by now, you are probably seeing the pattern. The strongest items on this list are not emergency foods. They are normal foods that keep saving money long after the emergency headline disappears. So here is the midpoint question. How many things in your kitchen feel cheap only because you have not seen the next price tag yet? Once you start noticing that pattern, the store stops looking like a menu and starts looking like a pricing system. The people who do best in periods like this are usually not more fearful. They are simply paying closer attention. And the next item may be the clearest example of buying utility before everyone else remembers its value. Honey looks expensive until you compare it with how long it lasts and how many jobs it can do. Then it starts looking less like a luxury and more like a highly efficient pantry item. Honey is unusual because, properly stored, it does not spoil in the normal way. It may crystallize, it may thicken, it may look slightly uncooperative in January. But that is not failure. That is just honey being honey. Sit the jar in warm water and it usually comes back. The supply side is less reassuring. Bee colonies have been under pressure for years, and when pollinators struggle, honey production falls. Smaller producers are already talking about higher costs, and when local prices rise first, large retail channels rarely stay untouched for long. This is why families who think ahead often buy honey with a different mindset. Not as a treat, but as a stable sweetener and useful ingredient. It works in tea, baking, marinades, sauces, and the kind of sore throat remedy people suddenly remember every winter. One spoonful often does more than an entire aisle of sugar pretending to be wellness. If a jar rises from $7 to $10 or $11, many people will just buy less and move on. But that misses the bigger advantage. Honey stores for years, reduces waste, and keeps earning its place in the pantry long after flashier foods disappear. And once you begin thinking in terms of nutrient density, not just shelf life, canned fish becomes very hard to ignore. Canned fish has an image problem, which is financially useful. It sounds old-fashioned, a little joyless, and vaguely connected to cupboards people do not show guests. That works in your favor because it means many shoppers still underestimate it. Fish populations have been affected by warming waters, shifting migration patterns, and higher fuel costs for fishing fleets. Those pressures eventually land in the can. Some distributors have already warned about tighter supply in categories like salmon and sardines, with possible increases around 30% or more. That matters because canned fish offers something many cheap foods do not: serious nutrition with almost no preparation. Canned salmon can become patties, rice bowls, pasta, salads, or a quick spread. Sardines, despite their public relations problem, are among the most nutrient-dense bargains in the store. Protein, omega-3s, calcium, and no need to thaw anything. Water-packed versions are often the smarter buy. They usually cost less and give you control over your own oil and seasoning later, instead of paying for lower-quality oil packed into the product. Larger cans can be especially efficient when they are discounted. One can of salmon stretched across 2 or 3 meals can compare surprisingly well with the price of fresh seafood, which in many places has become almost theatrical. And unlike fresh fish, canned fish asks very little of you. No freezer space, no timing, no quiet debate at the fridge about whether it still smells fine. That convenience has real value. But if one category combines low cost, long shelf life, and the power to replace more expensive protein over and over again, it is dried beans and lentils. Beans and lentils are almost too practical to market well. They are not trendy. They do not come with lifestyle branding. They do not claim to optimize your morning routine. They just save money repeatedly, which may be why they get ignored. Legume markets have also dealt with drought and erratic weather in multiple growing regions, so even these staples are not guaranteed to stay cheap forever. But the real story is substitution. A pound of dried beans often costs around $2 and can provide protein comparable to several times that amount in meat. That is where the annual savings become real. Not in one cart, in repetition. Replace enough meat-centered meals with black bean tacos, lentil soup, chickpea curry, or bean chili, and the savings can reach into the hundreds without much effort. Different types solve different problems. Black beans are versatile and filling. Red lentils cook quickly, often in about 15 minutes, which matters when time or fuel is tight. Chickpeas can become hummus, soup, salads, or roasted snacks, and dried chickpeas are dramatically cheaper than canned. There is also a quality of life detail many people learn late. Better prep makes beans easier to live with. Soaking in salted water can improve both texture and digestibility. Stored in food-safe, airtight containers, dry beans can last for years. Add a bay leaf if you like a simple pest deterrent. And this is a useful point to pause again. How many meals in your house start with meat simply because that feels normal, not because it is the cheapest option? Once you see that pattern, grocery spending starts looking a lot less mysterious. Which brings us to one of the quiet backbones of the whole pantry: flour and baking essentials. Flour does not look dramatic in the cart, but it becomes incredibly valuable when prepared foods get expensive. Bread, pancakes, biscuits, muffins, tortillas, pizza dough, flatbreads, even simple noodles all begin with some version of cheap dry ingredients and a little technique. The pressure here is familiar by now. Wheat markets remain unstable. Fertilizer costs have stayed elevated. Bakers are already seeing wholesale prices rise before many shoppers notice much at retail. That delay can trick people into thinking flour is still cheap because flour has always been cheap. History is not a pricing strategy. The smart move is not just buying flour, it is building a basic system around it. Bread flour if you bake regularly, because the higher protein often gives better structure. Baking powder and baking soda, because flour without leavening quickly becomes limiting. And yeast, especially in bulk, because the tiny supermarket packets are one of the most overpriced products in the baking aisle. This is one of the clearest convenience markups in the store. A 1-pound vacuum-sealed bag of yeast can equal dozens of packets for a fraction of the cost. Same result. Different packaging. Very different price per use. Storage matters more than people think. Move flour into airtight containers. And if you want extra insurance, freezing it for 48 hours before long-term storage can help deal with any hidden insect eggs. Not a charming thought, but an effective one. Knowing how to turn flour into food is not just a hobby. It is one of the few grocery skills that directly lowers your dependence on overpriced prepared items. And when fresh protein gets more expensive, that flexibility matters even more. Canned meat and other shelf-stable proteins are no longer just emergency food. Increasingly, they are a budgeting tool. Beef remains expensive. Poultry has dealt with disease-related disruptions. Pork has faced feed cost pressure. The result is that many families now pause in front of the meat case the way they used to pause only in front of steak. This is where canned chicken, canned beef, and shelf-stable salmon pouches become more useful than people expect. Not because they are glamorous, but because they are already cooked, portionable, and often cheaper per practical use than fresh meat once you factor in trimming, cooking time, and spoilage risk. A can of chicken at $3.50 that stretches into soup, casserole, wraps, enchiladas, or chicken salad can compare very well with fresh chicken that costs more and still demands refrigeration and prep. And quality has improved. Some shelf-stable proteins are genuinely decent now, which matters because if a food is theoretically economical, but no one in the house wants to eat it, that is not savings. It is shelf decoration. One useful rule here is rotation. Even though these products last for years, using and replacing them every 6 months or so helps maintain quality and teaches you which brands deserve space. Rinsing some canned meats can also improve flavor and reduce excess sodium. The hidden value is resilience. During bad weather, a power issue, or just a chaotic week, ready-to-eat protein can keep meals moving without a last-minute run to the store. And that same logic leads naturally to one of the least glamorous but most effective pantry tools on this list. Vinegar may be one of the least flashy products in the entire grocery store, which is probably why so many people underestimate it. Most households think of it as a condiment or a cleaning product. In reality, it is also a preservation tool, a waste reduction tool, and in many cases a budget tool disguised as a jug. Production costs for acetic acid have faced pressure from energy and industrial supply issues, so vinegar is not magically protected from inflation. But even if a gallon rises from $8 to $12 in some categories, it still offers more utility than many foods costing far more. White vinegar can be used for pickling, cleaning, deodorizing, and produce washing. Apple cider vinegar has its own uses in cooking and light home care. But from a grocery budget perspective, the most powerful habit may be quick pickling. Cucumbers, onions, carrots, peppers, even eggs can be extended instead of forgotten. And that changes the math on produce waste, which is one of the most common ways households lose grocery money without noticing. This is worth pausing on. People will spend 10 minutes comparing brands to save 40 cents, then throw away $3 or $4 worth of vegetables because they softened in the drawer. Preservation is not exciting, but it is one of the purest forms of grocery savings. Keep vinegar in its original container, store it simply, and use it often. A basic pickling habit can rescue food that otherwise would have become another small household regret in the back of the refrigerator. And once you are preserving and stretching food, the final category becomes the thing that makes all the others sustainable in real life. Salt and spices are the difference between a pantry and a punishment. That may sound exaggerated until you watch what happens in homes that try to save money by buying only plain staples. People do not usually get tired of cheap food because it is cheap. They get tired of it because it is bland. This category is also more fragile than it looks. Global spice production has been hit by storms, weather disruptions, labor issues, and expensive shipping. At the same time, grocery stores love selling spices in tiny jars with enormous markups. The spice itself is often not that expensive. The packaging is. Salt, of course, is more than seasoning. It also matters for food preservation and is one of the few pantry items that is almost absurdly stable. Large bags from warehouse clubs or restaurant supply stores often cost very little relative to how long they last. As for spices, a few basics do a lot of work: garlic powder, onion powder, cumin, paprika, black pepper, and one or two blends you actually use. They can turn rice, beans, eggs, pasta, and canned proteins from backup food into normal food. That matters because the best budget plan is the one your household will keep eating. The smartest buying rule here is simple. Check ethnic markets or bulk bins when possible. The difference can be dramatic. What costs $4 in a tiny supermarket bottle may cost the same or less in a bag 2, 3, or 4 times the size somewhere else. Store spices away from heat and light. And if you want longer life, whole spices often outperform pre-ground ones. But even ordinary ground spices, if bought well, do something important beyond flavor. They protect your willingness to cook from what you already have. And that protects your budget from convenience food. That is really the pattern behind this entire list. The households that handle grocery inflation best are usually not buying exotic products or preparing for some cinematic collapse. They are buying versatile, boring-looking, high-utility foods before everyone else remembers they need them. They understand the hidden price logic of the grocery store. Marketing gets attention. Packaging gets margin. Convenience gets overcharged. But basic ingredients, bought at the right time, still give ordinary families a real advantage. Canned tomatoes turn scraps into meals. Peanut butter turns a snack into backup fuel. Oils keep cooking possible. Pasta and flour provide structure. Honey keeps almost indefinitely and earns its shelf space over time. Canned fish and shelf-stable meats help solve the protein problem without the fresh meat markup. Beans and lentils may still be the strongest value anywhere in the building. Vinegar cuts waste. Salt and spices make all of it sustainable. That is not panic buying. It is simply refusing to pay premium prices later for foods you already know you will use. So the calm approach is still the right one. Do not run out and buy everything in one trip. Just pick 1 or 2 categories each time you shop. Watch shelf prices. Learn which stores quietly offer better value. Rotate what you buy. Build slowly. A pantry built without stress usually saves the most money because it reflects how you actually eat, not how you imagine you might eat in some future emergency. And perhaps that is the most valuable part of all this. In a period when so many prices feel arbitrary, a small amount of planning restores something people miss more than they admit: control. Not perfect control. Grocery stores will still do what grocery stores do, but enough control to make your next bill a little less punishing, your kitchen a little more flexible, and your household a little less exposed to whatever the next round of price increases happens to be. If this helped you think differently about your grocery spending, consider subscribing. There is a lot more hidden inside everyday prices than most people are ever told.